Sometimes, the loudest lies are heard in the name of honor, and the truest love stays silent, even when the world screams against it. I was never a rebel, just a sister who believed that love could heal everything. But I was wrong because sometimes the ones we love most are the ones who break us the deepest. My name is Sarah, and this story is about how my brother's pride became stronger than his love. After our father passed away, Adilbai took responsibility for everything: our home, our mother, and me. I always admired him, his confidence, his strength, his sense of right and wrong. To me, he was everything a brother should be. But with time, that love started to change. His care became control, and his protection turned into walls around my life. He decided who I talked to, where I went, even what I wore. I never complained because I thought this was love, his way of keeping me safe. One evening, everything changed because of a simple message. An old college friend, Hassan, texted me to invite me to his wedding. I smiled, replied congratulations, and thought that was the end of it. But when Adilbai saw that message on my phone, it felt like my world collapsed. His eyes were filled with anger I couldn't understand. "Who is this boy? Why is he messaging you?" he shouted. I tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear anything. In his eyes, I was guilty, not because I'd done something wrong, but because I was his sister and someone had dared to message me. That night, silence filled our house like a storm that never ends. He stopped talking to me properly. Even Amy tried to explain that I was innocent, but he wouldn't listen. He thought he was protecting the family's honor, but in truth, he was destroying its peace. Rumors started spreading in the neighborhood. Ugly, twisted things that weren't true. People whispered behind my back, and Bai's anger grew with every word he heard. I stopped defending myself. I thought my silence would prove my truth. But silence, I learned, can be the loudest punishment. I started writing letters to Bai, letters I never gave him, where I poured out my heart. "I'm not against you, Bai. I just want you to see that your sister is still the same girl who prays for you every night." But those letters stayed hidden in my drawer, like me, unseen, unheard, forgotten. One evening, when Bai shouted at me in front of Amy, something inside me broke. Not because he didn't trust me, but because he never tried to. That night, I cried till my soul felt empty. And in that silence, I realized something. Sometimes the people who talk about honor the most are the ones who forget the meaning of love. I didn't hate him. I never could. I just prayed that one day he'd look beyond his ego and see the truth. I wasn't fighting him. I was fighting the shadow of his pride that had blinded him to who I truly was. Days turned into weeks after that fight, but in my house, time didn't move anymore. It just stood still, heavy like silence before storm. Bai barely spoke to me. Every step I took felt watched, every breath judged. I started avoiding his eyes because I could see the anger still burning there, not the kind that comes from hate, but the kind that comes from hurt pride. And that's what broke me the most, knowing he loved me once, but now that love had turned into suspicion. I tried to stay busy, helping Amy in the kitchen, cleaning, praying, anything to keep my heart from breaking more. But every time Bai walked past me without saying a word, it felt like a knife through my chest. I wanted to scream that I was innocent, that I'd never bring shame to his name, but my voice was trapped behind the fear that he'd never listen. Sometimes, silence feels safer than truth. One night, I overheard Amy crying in her room. She was praying for peace, whispering my name and Bai's together, asking Allah to fix what had broken between us. Her voice trembled with the weight of every mother's pain, the kind that comes when her children stop talking, not because they hate each other, but because their love has turned into misunderstanding. I stood outside her door, tears streaming down my face, wishing I could take away her worry. But I couldn't even fix my own heart. Rumors didn't stop. A neighbor saw me once buying groceries and told another woman that I looked shameless. I don't know what hurt more, their words or by believing them. The world loves to watch a family break. It gives them something to talk about at dinner. But for the ones living inside that storm, it feels like drowning. A few days later, I tried talking to Bai again. I waited until Amy was asleep and knocked softly on his door. He opened it, his face cold, his eyes tired. "Bye," I whispered. "Please, can we talk?" He didn't say anything, just stood there. So I kept speaking, my voice shaking. "I swear, I didn't do anything wrong. That message, it was nothing. Please believe me." He looked at me for a long time before replying. "Sarah, you might be telling the truth. But people don't care about truth. They care about what they see. And what they see is enough to destroy us." Then he closed the door. That moment, it changed something inside me. I realized he wasn't protecting our family anymore. He was protecting his pride. Honor had become his armor, and love had become his weakness. I started writing again. Not letters this time, but in a diary. Every night, I wrote about the things I couldn't say aloud. Today, I looked tired. I wrote once. Maybe his heart is hurting too, just like mine. I didn't hate him, I pitied him, because I could see the man inside him still fighting to believe me, but the voice of society was louder than mine. One evening, Amy fell sick. I had to take her to the hospital, and I went along. Sitting in the waiting room beside him felt strange. We were so close, yet so far. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, but I could feel his guilt in the air. When the doctor came out and said Amy needed rest, I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear. Not of losing honor, but of losing her. And for the first time, I thought maybe pain could break through his pride where words never could. That night, I stayed by Amy's side, holding her hand while she slept. I came into the room quietly and stood near the door. I didn't look at him, but I could feel his eyes on me. After a moment, he said softly, "Sarah, you should rest." His tone wasn't angry, not cold, just tired. I nodded and smiled faintly. It was a small thing, but to me, it felt like the first drop of rain after a long drought. But peace doesn't last long when pride still lives in the heart. The next morning, a relative came to visit and made a cruel comment about me. She said, "Adil, log kh rahi hain tumhari behen ka character thik nahi." I froze. Bai's face turned red. Instead of defending me, he just stayed silent. And that silence screamed louder than any insult. That day, I realized I wasn't fighting just my brother. I was fighting a society that had taught men like him that a woman's worth depends on what others say, not who she truly is. And yet, I kept loving him. Because no matter how much he hurt me, he was still my brother. The one who once held my hand when I was scared. The one who promised Abu he'd always protect me. I just wished he understood that protection doesn't mean control. It means trust. I used to think that truth always wins. That no matter how big the lie, one day it collapses under its own weight. But I was wrong. Sometimes, truth doesn't lose because it's weak, it loses because no one is willing to hear it. Weeks passed, and my life became a pattern of silence and stares. I had stopped shouting now, but that didn't make things better. His silence was heavier than his anger ever was. It was like living with a stranger, someone who shared the same roof, but not the same heart. Amy tried her best to keep the peace, but even she had grown tired. Every time she looked at me, I could see the sadness in her eyes, the sadness of a mother who had to choose between her children when all she wanted was love between them. I had stopped writing letters. There was nothing left to say. I still prayed for Bai every night, asking Allah to soften his heart. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about a message anymore. It was about his ego. It wasn't about what I did, it was about what he thought I did. And no proof, no tears, no love could erase that. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Hassan's wife, the girl he had married, Sana. She sounded kind, her voice calm and gentle. She said, "Sarah, I just wanted to thank you for being so respectful even when people twisted your friendship with Hassan. He always said you were one of the most decent people he met." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and my eyes filled with tears. Someone finally said out loud what I had been praying for months to hear, that I wasn't guilty, that I wasn't the person people had made me out to be. After the call ended, I sat quietly, staring at the wall. I wanted to run to Bai and tell him everything, but I stopped myself. I realized it didn't matter what anyone said, unless he wanted to believe me, he never would. And maybe I needed to stop trying to prove myself and start protecting my peace. That evening, I went to the rooftop, where the sky was painted in orange and blue. I looked at the city, so alive, so full of noise, and yet I felt completely invisible. Ya Allah, I whispered, if truth can't change his heart, then please, change mine enough to forgive him. Because forgiveness felt easier than the pain of waiting for his apology. But fate had its own way of opening closed eyes. One night, when Bai was in his room, I heard him arguing on the phone with someone. His voice was angry, frustrated, not at me, but at life. I've lost everything, he said. Even my sister doesn't look at me with respect anymore. His words hit me like lightning. He was suffering too, drowning in guilt and pride, but unable to reach out. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt compassion. Maybe this was Allah's way of showing me that even the ones who hurt us are fighting their own battles inside. A few days later, Amy convinced him to sit with me for dinner. It was the first time in months we had eaten together. The silence between us was fragile, but not angry. He didn't look at me much, but at one point he said softly, "How's your health, Sarah?" My heart skipped a beat. Just a simple question, but it meant the world to me.
"I've fine, bye," he whispered.
He nodded, then focused on his plate. That night, I cried again, but not from pain this time. From relief. Because I saw a small crack in the wall between us. Sometimes, Allah doesn't change hearts in a moment. He breaks them slowly, gently, until love finds a way to slip through. The next morning, I left a small note on his table. I didn't write explanations or evidence, just one line. Bye, I still pray for you, not because you're always right, but because I still love you even when you're wrong. He didn't mention the note, but I saw it folded neatly on his desk days later. And that was enough for me. Still, I couldn't ignore how the world had shaped him. Every man he met talked about honor,
Control, and what people say.
They taught him that a man's pride mattered more than a woman's peace. That's why even when he wanted to say sorry, he couldn't, because he thought admitting his mistake would make him weak. But the truth is, weakness isn't in apologizing. It's in letting love die quietly while ego stands tall. I didn't know when things would change, but I started to feel hope again. Small, fragile, like a candle in the wind. Maybe someday, he would look at me the way he used to, with trust, not judgment. Maybe one day, our home would feel like home again. Until then, I kept my heart open. Because no matter how broken I was, I still believed love can heal everything, even when truth has lost its voice. Life has a strange way of bringing truth to light, not through loud confessions, but through quiet moments that leave you breathless. I didn't know that the night my whole world would change was coming so soon. It was a Friday evening. The house was silent except for the sound of Amy's tasbih. Bai had been unusually quiet for the past few days. Not angry, not distant, just lost. I could see it in his eyes every time he walked past me. Something inside him was shifting, something he didn't know how to face. That evening, I was sitting in the living room, helping Amy fold clothes, when Bai came home early. His face looked pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held his phone. He didn't say salam. He just walked straight to his room. I wanted to ask if he was okay, but my voice froze just like always. A few minutes later, I heard something fall in his room, a thud, like a drawer being opened and papers scattering. Then silence again. After a few moments, I knocked gently on his door. Bai. No answer. I pushed it slightly open and saw him sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a few papers in his hands, my letters. The ones I'd written months ago and hidden away in my drawer. Somehow, he had found them. My heart stopped. He looked up at me, eyes red, tears threatening to fall but not quite there. Sarah, why didn't you tell me you wrote these? His voice cracked. I froze in the doorway, my heart pounding. Because you wouldn't have read them, I said softly. You didn't want to hear me then. He lowered his gaze, fingers trembling as he held one letter tighter. You still prayed for me after everything? I smiled faintly, though my eyes were already wet. I never stopped. That moment felt like time had stopped. For months, I had dreamed of him believing me, But standing there, watching his guilt, I didn't feel victory. I just felt peace and pain, all at once. He stood up, stepped closer, and whispered, "Sarah, I've been so blind. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my pride." His voice broke completely this time. I let the world tell me who my sister was, instead of listening to her myself. Tears fell freely down his face, and for the first time in forever, he didn't try to hide them. "Forgive me, Sarah," he whispered, his words shaking. "I hurt you so much. I killed your smile, your peace." I shook my head gently. "No, Bai, you just lost your way for a while. We all do." He sank to his knees, covering his face with his hands. I had seen him strong, angry, proud, but never broken. That night, the walls that had divided us finally spoke, not through arguments or explanations, but through silence, forgiveness, and tears. I sat beside him on the floor, holding his hand the same way I used to when we were kids. For the first time, he didn't pull away. We didn't need words anymore. When Amy walked in and saw us like that, she just stopped, her tasbih slipping from her fingers. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Alhamdulillah." She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. A mother always knows when her children have finally come home to each other. Later that night, Bai came to my room and placed something on my table, a small envelope. Inside, there were screenshots of messages and a note from Hassan's wife, proving that everything I'd said was true. "I met them today," Bai said quietly. "Sanaa told me everything. I can't believe I doubted you for so long." I held the letter and smiled through my tears. "Maybe it had to happen this way," I whispered, "so we could both learn what love really means." He looked at me, confused. I continued, "You thought love meant control. I thought love meant patience. But maybe real love means forgiveness." Bai nodded slowly, his eyes softening. "You're stronger than I ever was, Sarah." For the first time, I saw the brother I used to know. Not the angry man the world had created, but the one who once taught me how to ride a bike, who used to bring me ice cream after school, who promised Abu he'd always protect me. We prayed Isha together that night, something we hadn't done in months. When we finished, Bai whispered a dua under his breath. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the regret in his eyes, and that was enough. The next morning felt different. The house wasn't filled with tension anymore. The air was lighter, softer, like forgiveness had washed every wall clean. Amy smiled for the first time in weeks, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. But deep down, I also knew something else. Forgiveness doesn't erase scars. It just helps them stop hurting. That night, as I lay in bed, I looked at the ceiling and whispered, "Alhamdulillah." Because sometimes, Allah doesn't give us justice, He gives us wisdom. And that's even more powerful. People say time heals everything, but I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal. It teaches you how to live with what can't be changed. It doesn't erase pain. It just gives you new reasons to smile despite it. And maybe that's the kind of healing we really need. It's been months since that night when everything came crashing down, and yet, in that fall, I found the strength to rise. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. We didn't start laughing at the breakfast table like a happy movie family. But something had shifted, a quiet understanding, a softness in how we looked at each other. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than 1,000 apologies. Bai stopped calling me by nicknames, but the way he said Sarah now carried a kind of warmth that I had forgotten. He didn't say sorry again, and I didn't need him to. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about the words. It's about the peace that comes after you stop expecting them. One evening, as I stood on the rooftop watching the sunset, Bai joined me silently. The sky was turning golden, fading into orange and purple hues. For a moment, we just stood there, letting the wind brush against our faces. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I used to think protecting you meant controlling you," he said quietly. "But now I know it means trusting you even when the world doesn't." His words sank deep into me. That was all I had ever wanted, not permission, not freedom, just trust. And in that moment, I finally felt seen. After that day, Things changed in small, unspoken ways. He started helping Amy more. He smiled a little easier. Sometimes, I'd find him sitting in Abba's old chair, staring out the window, lost in thought. Maybe he was making peace with his own guilt. Maybe he was learning to forgive himself. As for me, I stopped writing letters I'd never send. I started writing for myself. Not to prove my truth to anyone, but to remind myself that I survived it. I learned that peace doesn't come when people believe you. It comes when you stop needing them to. One night, I found Bai in the living room, looking through an old photo album. He smiled as he turned a page. It was a picture of us as kids, covered in mud, laughing after playing in the rain. "We used to be fearless," he said softly. "We still can be," I replied. He looked at me for a long moment and nodded. Maybe this time in the right way. And that was the thing, sometimes we don't lose people. We just lose the version of them who didn't know better. When they learn, when they grow, when they come back, they're not the same. But neither are we. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything. The tears, the silence, the pain, the forgiveness. And I realized that maybe the whole journey was never about proving who was right or wrong. It was about learning that love without understanding is just possession, and understanding without love is emptiness. I often wonder how many homes stay broken not because of lies, but because of pride. How many relationships die, not because of betrayal, but because no one chose to listen. Maybe that's why Allah keeps testing us through the people we love, not to break us, but to teach us that Iman isn't just in prayer, it's in patience, in restraint, in forgiveness. Bai prays more now. He doesn't talk about the past, and neither do I. But sometimes, after far, when he passes by my room and says softly, "Dua mein yad rakhna," I know he means more than those words say. I've learned that family isn't perfect. It's messy, loud, and full of mistakes. But if there's love underneath all the noise, it's worth saving. Today, when I tell my story, I don't tell it as a victim. I tell it as a survivor of silence, a girl who learned that truth doesn't always roar sometimes, it just whispers. Keep going. So if you're listening to this right now, if someone ever broke your trust or made you question your worth, remember this. The pain you feel isn't the end of your story. It's just the part where you find your strength. Because no matter how heavy your truth feels, one day it will speak for itself. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but when it does, it won't need to shout. It will simply exist, clear and unshakable, just like light that finds its way through the cracks. And when that happens, you'll realize what I did, that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. My name is Sarah, and this was the story of how I lost everything I thought I needed, just to find the peace I truly deserved.